Hey everyone, my name is Nick Lambert. I'm the CEO of Doc Labs, and welcome to our latest live event. We haven't had one for a while, so we've got a lot of pent up excitement and motivation to get this one going. Today's topic is mobiles, drivers, digital driver's licenses, often shortened to mDLs. And as many of us know that listen to this this webinar and others and are focused on the identity industry, we'll all know that they're gaining traction across the US specifically, but rollout and traction is still somewhat fragmented. And today's guest and his company want to change that. So when the industry thinks about some of the kind of major distributors of consumer wallets, we would think about Google, Apple, and Samsung. There's at least the ones that would come to mind for me. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Rob White, who is the head of identity services at Samsung Wallet. Rob, thank you very much for joining us. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Nick.
You're very welcome. So as we get through this episode, Rob is going to fill us in a little bit as a kind of spoiler around the vision and strategy that they're employing around digital identity at Samsung in the US, how they are seeing and thinking about the future of mDLs, and how Samsung are working with ID providers and relying parties to really bring a lot more security and convenience to the many millions of users that they look after. As usual, the structure will be a Q&A between Rob and myself, and then we'll follow that up with some audience questions towards the end. So if you are listening, thank you very much for joining us. If you want to ask a question, just submit it into the Riverside app that you're watching this stream on, and then Francisco will organize those and we'll ask them to Rob at the end of the show. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, and please let us know where you're listening from. It's always good for us to see the international flavor of the audience. So thanks for that. And without further ado, Rob, I'll get over to you. So maybe you can just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role at Samsung, please.
Yeah, happy to. So again, I'm Rob White. I've been working on mobile payment and mobile wallets for about 12 years now. I was part of a company that Samsung acquired in 2015 to kind of start Samsung Pay, and it provided a technology that allowed for mobile payment at legacy terminals, right? So it was a little bit of an advancement. It had about an 80% acceptance rate, where NFC at the time was probably around 25% or so. So, over the last 10 years at Samsung, I've worked in various product and business roles on the Pay and wallet team. Last few years have been very focused on digital identity. I mean, this is something that I think is really important. It's something that's emerging, and it's a really interesting area for me. So I've been putting a lot of my energy into this and looking forward to seeing the ecosystem, take off.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. So then kind of zooming back for the kind of big picture stuff as we're trying to get our arms around this topic, Rob, what's Samsung's overall vision in the US for mDLs? How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, sure. So, our goal, is to make it easy and convenient, for users to securely assert their identity, right? We want to help them protect the privacy of their data, help ultimately, I think, reduce fraud, for businesses, for government, really any relying parties. And, the overall goal, for Samsung Wallet has been to provide great experiences on our devices, right? So, Wallet is tied to our hardware, in the sense we leverage the technology. We use our embedded secure element, for security purposes. We have capabilities like swipe up on our devices, which make it very easy to access the wallet. We are making wallet available on the watch, including identity and mobile driver's license. So we think just single tap with your watch makes it nice and easy. And the goal for wallet is really replacement of your physical wallet, with all of the things that you put into the old leather wallet. So payment, loyalty cards, passes, keys, tickets, IDs, all of these things come into the digital version of it. And it just continues to evolve, right? So Next month, we're releasing a new P2P payment feature, right? You just kind of tap two phones together to send money to a friend. And it's pretty cool, right? So we're excited about it. But, really the latest and I think arguably the most important content that we've added to Wallet is mDL, right? So mDLs, not just about replacing, plastic with digital, right? It's really a shift to an easier, safer way to share your identity and have control over it, right? So this is what we want to offer to our user base, right? So we see a lot of reports on, how easy it is to create fake documents, fake IDs, even to, deep fakes, right? To pose as somebody else, in a setting like this. Even reports on, foreign agents infiltrating, Fortune 500 companies and other. So I think, we see it as the current protections, just aren't holding up to the flood of this kind of fraudulent behavior. And maybe we need to start basing identity on technology, like digital signatures, sort of this trusted chain of custody, from the issuer through to the relying party. And we think wallets are the right place to hold these credentials. They hold a lot of other content. Ultimately, we can see a day where content can be sent in combination, right? So the idea of maybe sending ID when you make a payment, right, or other. And, as a leading device and wallet maker, we think that we're in a great position to help enable this.
Yeah. So really, that's a great an extensive answer, and it sounds a lot to do with obviously trust and convenience for users, and obviously the kind of secure aspect that you guys can offer. Really interested at some point later in the conversation to understand the peer-to-peer payment thing. That sounds really interesting as well. And just going back to kind of the mDLs, what are you seeing then is that, so obviously it's a big focus for Samsung strategy in the US, Rob, but what are you seeing as the biggest hurdles to adoption there, at least right now? And how are you guys thinking about overcoming those hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big undertaking overall. I mean, there are people that have been working on this problem for a long time. There's a lot of players involved, and I guess we should all expect that there are going to be some challenges along with that. Maybe the first one is, just human nature. People are cautious on, I think, new technology that really does the same things or enhances the same things that, they've learned to do over time, right? So, we heard this a lot with mobile payments. When we started mobile payments, if I had a dime for every time I got the question of, what happens if I load all of my credit cards into my phone and then I lose my phone, right? And it was a surprising question to me, but it was really the number one question. And, when you think about it, you carry around this piece of plastic that, can be compromised at any moment. You could leave it on the tray at McDonald's, drop it on the ground. Somebody could skim it, take a picture of it. So the idea that people didn't just immediately realize that, your phone is protected by biometrics, the wallet is protected. Even if you don't understand tokenized payments, you can remotely wipe your phone. But it took a while, for people to really warm up and get over that security concern, right? And I think with anything to do with your ID, your personal information, there is a legitimate concern over the privacy of the data and whether, that somehow you're going to be tracked, by that data, or it's going to phone home when you make a transaction. So I think a lot of education is needed. And I think that, education about securing that data, preserving privacy, not phoning home, right? And as a wallet vendor, we can message our user base, right? So in the app, we have other channels to talk to our users, and we can try to educate them that this is a safe, privacy protecting way to share your identity, right? Maybe the second big hurdle, unless did you want to weigh in? Maybe a second big hurdle.
No, it's good. And I was just going to actually, I don't, sorry, Rob, I didn't want to interrupt your flow there yet. And it's great to move into that. And it would just be interesting as well, as you finish that answer, also to think about like the education part. You can message your users inside the app, but be interesting to see if there's ways, because obviously educating sometimes specific user groups about, not phoning home, even what that means, that can be challenging as well. So I guess, I don't know if you've got any thoughts around, there is that kind of component of education, but I guess, how do you deliver that in a way that the masses can understand it, and with such short attention spans that everyone seems to have these days? So if you could roll that into your next answer, that'd be great. And sorry to interrupt your flow there.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I think it's a tough problem, right? So at the end of the day, trying to explain to people, and to some extent, you're talking to people that, may use a mobile wallet, but haven't, loaded their identity yet, right? So they may be cautious about doing that. And I think that's the group that we can start to talk to and to message, and just talk about the security aspects of it, right? So, but it is hard to get that message across. There's a couple of other challenges too. I mean, I think there's clearly, here in the US, there's a big chicken and egg problem, right? So the issuers have been slower to move, until there are use cases, for relying parties, and relying parties, are slow until there are enough IDs out there in order to make use of them, right? And to serve their business. So really, the infrastructure's just not really in place yet, right? It's going to come, and we're confident of that, but it's not in place yet. And I think the ecosystem's just evolving at a pace that reflects this, right? So, with Samsung Wallet, we're live with 6 states issuing into Wallet today. We're connecting with relying parties. We're trying to make it easy for relying parties to work with us. And if there's anybody out there today that has an idea, wants to work with a wallet provider like Samsung, please, connect with us. And I think a third one is lack of law enforcement acceptance, right? So this is I think, really important topic. And I think that we need a true habit-changing use case. The primary reason why we all carry our license with us all the time is in case we get, stopped by the police, right? I mean, this is the number one reason. If I were just using it for opening a bank account or, traveling, I know when I'm doing that, right? I don't carry my ski pass around with me all the time, right? So I think law enforcement, once we get law enforcement use case, I think things will move a lot quicker. And I'd say, Nick, one other thing is I think we have to give a lot of credit, to the early adopter states, right? The ones that have kind of jumped in, head first and decided this is an important problem they're going to tackle. The standards bodies, AMVA, TSA, and, all of these kind of early players that are laying the groundwork. And we're trying to support those organizations.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And I think the education point, to come back to that, this is obviously an issue for all of us. I think there's an element here where we're trying to get adoption of this technology for everyone. So I think there's an element of cooperation between everyone working in the space, that we all educate users. So just to make that point, it's obviously not all on Samsung's shoulders to do that. I think there'll be lots of ways that we can all input to that. And do you get any sense, Rob, it was a really interesting point you made about law enforcement. Are you guys kind of connected there, and are you getting some kind of assurance or an expectation about when police officers, I guess, state troopers are going to be furnished with the equipment that enables them to verify those mDLs on the road?
Well, I think we've had conversations. I think there are some states that have tested out, technologies, maybe like Bluetooth, in order to transmit ID, and maybe, other programs. But, for widespread adoption, they've got to solve the basic problem, and it's got to be solved in a way that makes the scenario much better, right? So just, replacing what we do today with digital instead of plastic doesn't really, make the problem, better. So I think if you think about law enforcement, some of the big problems are you've got we're primarily right-handed, people, we drive on the left side of the road here in the US, and, I keep my phone in my console next to me. And I think the last thing an officer that comes up to the vehicle wants to see is me reaching over my body, to kind of give them the ID, or holding the phone outside the car where, what if it drops on the highway? Whose fault is that? It's $1,000 smartphone, right? So, we're not trying to put these scenarios in place just to do it, right? Just to make plastic into digital. It's got to make the scenario better. So we do have some technology at Samsung that we sell into law enforcement that goes into squad cars. It's sort of replacement for the laptop or DEX systems. We've thought through some of the problem. We know there's some technologies that we think could make this better. And, I guess I would suggest we've had conversations about it, but that's about where we're at.
Got it. I was going to suggest, as someone who lives in the UK, Rob, that you guys can solve that by driving on the opposite side of the road. But I think that would be probably out with our jobs to try and make that one stick. But yeah, it's really interesting, all the different considerations that you would have around the practicalities of actually using digital versus physical. A lot of things there you wouldn't necessarily think about. Is it fair to say then, Rob, that you're thinking more about government use cases, and maybe it's just because that was one of the kind of hurdles you'd highlighted, or are you in fact looking more on the commercial side of things, or is it really a combination?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say there's some practical reasons to look at some government use cases. So the reason would be, there's only a percentage of the states that have an MDL program currently in the US. So if you focus on some of the government use cases like benefits distribution or check-ins at various facilities in state, then that everybody can get access to it, right? Everybody can use it. So there are reasons to do that, but in general, I think it's equally as important to build out the commercial use cases. And, really, I think the most important scenarios are the ones that drive habit change and adoption, right? So if, when you take airport security, it's great, right? You can walk through the airport, you can tap your phone at TSA. It's the most known use case, but, not everybody travels. Not everybody travels frequently, right? It's easier to tap than maybe pull out your license. But the real question for some of the scenarios is how much easier. So I think it's another lesson that we learned from mobile payment, which is, old habits die hard, right? And if you're in the supermarket and your credit card is still in your wallet, you're equally as likely to pull your credit card out of the wallet and tap, right? So we need to focus on the use cases that really make a material difference for the user, make things easier for them, and drive that adoption. It's about frequency and impact.
Okay. Yeah,
maybe I'd also say, and Nick, maybe I can also maybe I just suggest maybe there's a different distinction, which is offline versus online, right? So I think the offline's a lot harder because you need physical readers, you need to train staff, online scenarios are just more self-explanatory. There's a link that you click through and, so I think that's, I think that maybe that's a bigger distinction.
Yeah. I wonder if you find as well, what we find at in our business at Doc Labs as well, is that sometimes I guess that the kind of commercial can sometimes move faster depending on the company, just because of the levels of maybe sometimes bureaucracy or process that exist inside government agencies can be quite slow. And so if you're moving to try and understand a new product in the marketplace, sometimes maybe going a commercial route with a smaller enterprise can actually at least give you a lot more feedback and information about that use case, which you might not get with a government use case. So I don't know if that figures into the way that you guys think about this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that sometimes, commercial, entities that have reasons to build things out, that are based on revenue, right? Move a little bit faster, maybe smaller, more nimble companies as well, build things faster. And we're working with a number of players, to try to create some of these use cases.
Okay, that makes sense. And are you seeing them, we talked kind of a little bit about kind of payments. I don't know if that's in part because of your background. I think you've drawn some really nice lessons that we can learn from the move towards digital payments, and we can maybe learn that same thing from wallets, which I think is a really good point that you made. Are you seeing some of those industry vertical use cases Are you seeing some crop up more than others? And is obviously retail is one that we're probably talking about a little bit. Are there others, Rob, that you're seeing maybe more interest from certain sectors than others?
Well, I think the two primary use cases, maybe for commercial at the moment are age restricted purchasing, right? So age over 21 and maybe KYC, right? So, identity verification, especially online, right? And those make sense, right? So, the best opportunities are the ones that are going to make a demonstrable difference for the users. They'll actually do them, right? Doesn't necessarily line up with any particular vertical or commercial versus government. I don't think, but those two I think are use cases that we're going to start seeing more widely adopted, right? And I do think like sometimes maybe the most pressing problems or maybe the problems that are not the most pressing are the ones that can help to drive adoption, right? Just a quick example, because I know it's been tested in a few places here in the U.S. And I was at a week or two ago, I was at a baseball game. I was at the Red Sox game here, and I probably spent most of the fourth inning standing in the beer line, and you realize that if the vendor could accept a mDL and everybody had one, the line would move faster, right? And that would be a little bit better. That'd be nicer. But frankly, if I didn't have to stand in line at all, and I could just go to a vending machine and tap my ID and tap to pay, and the beer would come out, and I just go back to my seat. That's not, me getting a beer quickly at a baseball game is not the most important use case to solve in society, but it would get me to, adopt the mDL, put it that way.
Yeah. And also it'd be great if vending machines could actually give you draft beer as well. I think that would be one of the other things that we need to work on.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any kinds of partnerships that you find are more critical to making mDLs usable? I think one that when we originally chatted to you and asked you to come on to the webinar, Rob, we talked a little bit about Amazon, and we'd had Paul Grassi on, who's their, I think, head of product. And he was talking a lot about Amazon's aspirations this year, Amazon, the e-commerce store, as opposed to the web services company, and their drive to become acceptors of things like mDLs. Do you see that type of partnership as being more critical to get things moving, or do you think it's from things like the states and government backed, or is it all of them?
Well, I think the state partnerships are super important, right? If we don't have issuers, we have nothing to secure or provision and deliver in terms of an ID. So I think those are super important. I do think Amazon is going to be a great use case. And, I know Paul's talked about things like account recoveries and their support for wallets, and we plan on participating along with them. I think that it will be eye-opening, for a lot of people, because it is Amazon and they're such a large and known retailer, so we're looking forward to that. And I think it's going to make a big difference pushing, just the, relying parties forward to even acknowledge, right, that this is something they want to start getting into. And
I don't know if you can say, are there any kind of partnerships or pilots that you're talking about that you can just now with regards to kind of mDLs? Is there any ones that you can mention, or are they all a bit stealth just now?
Yeah, I guess I can talk about the things that are public, right, that we've done in public or we've talked about in public. Amazon, I think, is one, that obviously has been talked about. We've set a strategy to try to work with some of the service providers, that do KYC. And I think that's important, because at the end of the day, those are the companies that are connected, to lots of end customers and can bring the solution to market. So, if everybody had an mDL, across the US today, it would be very disruptive to that set of companies, right? It would be a lot easier to verify identity online, and in person, I guess, so it's a good target, because, that current method that we all go through of doing the front back selfie, that takes about 5 minutes to go find your license and take a picture of the front and the back of it and a selfie and load it up. It's clumsy, right? It takes a bit to do it. With an mDL. You take that 5-minute experience down to about 5 seconds, right? So you tap a button, you get a consent sheet, and then you submit, right? And you do that with better privacy, with selective disclosure, and you do it with lower fraud rates, because that document is known to have come. It's digitally signed. It's known to have come from the issuer, from the system of record. So we did some demos in February at one of the events. We worked with companies like Mytech, Secure, Matter, and we showed off demos that essentially did this, right, online. So it was around account openings, money transfer, so high value money transfer. The idea that says, okay, you're gonna do a money transfer. We want to make sure we verify your identity before you ask to transfer, $10,000 or whatever it might be. We did it with rental car, right? So we worked with those companies to show that off, and we're working with them and others, to try to bring these solutions live, which I think we're close to doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the start, Rob, as well, about kind of wanting organizations kind of working in this space and looking to integrate, to get in touch with you. Is there any kind of qualities or capabilities that you're looking for from the companies that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at the end of, I think what we're looking for is partners that, want to work based on standards, certify their solution on industry best practices, kind of at the beginning of all of this. We want to try to do it right. Partners who can take our tools, and maybe build out mDL acceptance into their solutions, like the ones we just talked about a bit. Partners that want to be early adopters, right? So we've talked to a number of companies that just say, well, there aren't enough IDs out there. We're not ready to do it. I do think that, especially with these service providers, KYC business, companies should want to understand the user experience, understand the business model, right? And have it in their bag of tricks, right? So it's available when their customers ask about it, right? So, we're looking to connect with as many of these companies as we can, companies that are in different verticals, right? That might have different solutions in mind. We just had a conversation with a company the other day about, what would it take ultimately to do this kind of payment plus ID thing, right? So we're looking at trying to solve, some of the harder problems too. We just know it's going to take time.
Yeah, you can't boil the ocean, so just try and show some sign of progress, I guess, is the kind of message there. And we've touched a little bit on continually some of the kind of feedback around combining verified digital ID and payments. I think it's a lot of people seem to be looking in that area. And I know you've talked a little bit about that. Are you able to expand a little bit into that, Rob, in terms of, for things like high risk transactions, the level to which you're exploring combining identity and payments? Can you add any more color on some of the information you provided earlier on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
like, what's the potential, for example?
I mean, I think it's very early days. I mean, this is clearly, one of the things that the wallets are well positioned for, because we've got payment cards in the wallet, we've got identity in the wallet. Maybe it extends beyond that. If I go to the doctor's office and I want to submit a health insurance card with my identity, with my copay, maybe all at once. So I think that there's a goal to get there. And I think there's conversations that we can all have that might help us to move in the right direction. But we know it's going to take a long time. And we know that, anything that you do at the POS, right? Anything you do at point of sale is, to change the payment flow is going to, is a long process. So it's worthwhile because there's massive potential. And really this is all about reducing fraud, right? I mean, it's all about, how do we move away from, physical documents that, with these new technologies can be replicated or we can be fooled into using, and move to these move to digital. So maybe the faster path for that is online. I think that's one place to explore, to see if there's ways to even two-tap, right? To, accept an ID, verify the ID first, and then accept your payment. I've had some conversations around that, but, I think it's early days for us.
Yeah, fantastic. Great insights. From the perspective of the average Samsung user, today, what does that experience look like using an MDL in practice? Rob, are you able to kind of just quickly kind of talk us through those steps?
Yeah, it's pretty seamless, right? The experience is pretty seamless. This is the initial provisioning step, right? So you've got to get your physical ID and, do the front back selfie in order to have the state, green light that and provision. Once the ID is secured on our device, and again, our role as a wallet provider is to, securely provision, store, and transmit that ID. So once that ID is secured on our device, there's life cycle events that can take place. Privileges can be changed. It can be revoked at the end of the day. So, once it's on the device, we can simply swipe up, with a Samsung handset to get to our wallet easily. We have started to make it available on the Galaxy Watch, so you can provision it right to the watch at the same time. I think we mentioned that. So you can tap, when you hover your phone over that physical reader, NFC will be detected, or you can use the QR code to present the ID. It's presented with a consent sheet, so it's not immediately presented. The consent sheet pops up and you can see who's requesting your data and, what data they're requesting. You make the decision about whether you want to submit that data, and then it requires your biometric in order to consent to it. And I'd also point out that biometric is a one-to-one to the ID itself. So if, you've given your spouse, access to your phone, they may be able to poke around your phone, but they won't be able to send your ID. Right. So it's a one-to-one.
Yeah. So you might still get in trouble, but they can't go spending stuff in your wallet. So, the biometric stuff's great. So yeah, you could prove, you can still prove who you are. Like, I guess that just having access to the wallet means that you just have access to that, an unlocked phone, but the biometric tie-in makes it just that extra layer of security where you're actually ensuring that it's the right person that's actually operating that device and presenting a credential.
Yeah, and that's really, I think that's important for a lot of things, but I think for ID, it's critical, right? You have to be assured that it is that person that's sending their ID.
Yeah, definitely agreed. You spoke a little bit about standards earlier on, and obviously that's a key feature of interoperability, which is obviously still feels like a marketing term sometimes in this world of decentralized identity, but it's an aspiration, but it's definitely something that is going to make sure that credentials can be used in the same format widely across lots of different systems and platforms and applications. How important do you see is interop for mDLs for the US? And maybe that's probably a daft question because it's going to be important, but maybe you could talk a little bit about Samsung's approach to ensuring that users can use these mDLs as widely as possible.
Yeah, our approach is follow the standards, right? Like strict adherence to standards, and we're following the ISO standard, the 18013, 5 and 7 standards. And, without interoperability, it won't work. There's no MDL in the US if you can't be confident that you can use it in the same way that you use your physical card, right? So I live in the state of Massachusetts in the Boston area. I never think of my license as a Massachusetts ID. I just think of it as a driver's license. And if I go to New York, I present my ID, people accept it. There's no issue with that. So it can't work differently with digital. It can't work differently state to state. It can't work differently wallet to wallet. It's got to, it's got to work in concert. And the only way to do that is build to standards, test. We attend interop events, so we'll test more. We'll attend more of those. A lot of other, industry players show up at those, and everybody can test their solutions along with each other. We had one instance, with another company where there was an issue, with interoperability. We fixed it with them. And if there's issues, we want to do that. So, again, this is one of these like baseline items. Without interoperability, there's nobody's going to adopt it. And I should point out, like, that should, ultimately that should work globally too, not just within the US.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely agree. Yeah, and I think in the UK, at least, it looks like they're kind of starting to, obviously a lot of announcements coming out of the UK about a strategy toward digital identity, and they're certainly kind of talking about the ISO standard there. So I think that part's key as well. We certainly live we all travel a lot these days, or many of us do, and having that kind of global interop certainly seems to be really, really important. Slight change of tack, Rob, in terms of, it seems strange obviously there's quite a fierce amount of competition around kind of wallets, and we're seeing that even more so. If you live in the EU, it's pretty fierce. There's a lot of, obviously, eIDAS too, and wallets trying to be compliant with that coming regulation. So it seems like we have an absolute overabundance or an oversupply of wallets, based on the level of usage. I guess everyone's gearing up for the future where this is going to be ubiquitous. But how do you try it's difficult, I guess, as a provider to differentiate. How do you guys, do you try and do that? And if so, like what ways would you see you're able to differentiate your wallet offering to others in the market?
Yeah, certainly there are going to be other wallets. We're on the Android platform, and there's other wallets now. Our strategy is to make it the best experience possible on our devices, right? So we're leveraging the hardware on our devices in order to give the user the best experience that we can. So, again, we use the embedded secure element, not just for mDL, but for other functions as well. And, that's not just about, security. It is about security, but it's also about capabilities around faster transactions, in some cases battery reserve, right? So that if you run out of battery, you could still make a certain trade, get in your dorm room or something. If you can still use the phone. We want to tie it to our devices like the Galaxy Watch, right? So that you make it really easy to use on other devices. And I think if you look into the future, there's use cases for wallet and ID on other device types too. So we are leading, vendor of TVs, of appliances, IoT, all of these things, over time, have use cases for ID. So we think we can start to support that too. So we're not, in terms of competition, we really look at this as a rising tide at the moment. The ecosystem just needs to take off. And if you think about what wallets are, once payment is ubiquitous and I feel like I can leave my house without my credit cards, and, once my ID, can be accepted by law enforcement and I don't need to carry it around with me, I don't need to carry my plastic at all. Right. And I think at that point, you're going to see, really everybody, it's not a niche application. It's for everybody, right? It's going to use, mobile wallets. So, I think that's what our perspective is.
Yeah, very good. I absolutely. And that's what makes it probably so slow to bring in, because the UX, or the customer experience, is so important, because it is, as you say, for everyone, and everyone's at absolutely different levels of knowledge and understanding and familiarity with tech. So I think those are the challenges that we all face. Kind of crystal ball time a little bit, Rob, then looking ahead for kind of the next, say, 1 to 2 years, how do you gauge success for Samsung's kind of wallet and its incorporation of mDLs? What does a win look like for you guys?
Boy, that's a great question. I think we understand that this is a journey, right? It's not going to get solved quickly. And, to some extent, we can only move at the pace of the ecosystem, how fast the world around us is moving. There is no one player that does it all, right? So we do one portion of this, right? So I guess the basic answer to that question is, over the next year or two, is to enable more state issuing partners, right? To grow that list. to see the emergence of at least a handful of true habit changing use cases, where people are adopting for the right reasons, not simply because it's interesting to create a digital version instead of your physical version, but because, you get a material benefit from it. Maybe it's more like what my, guitar teacher always tells me. It's just about making progress, right? Continuous progress. So I do think, we're also going to see in the next year or two the addition of other credential types, right? Beyond just mDL. I think that, we want the wallet to be rounded and comprehensive, right? And include the ability to pass other types of credentials along with it. So I think that would also help us to move things forward.
Yeah, excellent. And are there any specific and this will kind of be final question, then we kind of get into the audience questions, and there's a few coming in already, which are great. And please continue to add more kind of based on what Rob and I have been discussing. Kind of final question from me directly. Are there any specific features or innovations you're particularly excited about rolling out in the next kind of phase of mDL support, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we say the next phase, I feel like we're still at the early phases, right? In the first phase. And, we've talked a lot about online verification, in-person use cases. But the next phase is really seeing some traction, right? Getting those into market and seeing traction with those. And, with services like Amazon's use of digital identity, I think that will help to push it forward. I think some of the work that standards bodies have done in creating the capability for online verification of readers and the Part 7 NXD piece, I think, is going to be really helpful and important, to drive usage and make it easier for relying parties to implement. So I think that that, along with maybe, exploring some of these, new ID types over time are things that get us excited.
Very good. Great answer. All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Rob. We're into audience questions now, which is always interesting. So I'll start to kind of move through these, and Francisco has kind of consolidated a list for us. So Pierce, thank you for your question. Pierce is asking, can ID credentials contained in the Samsung wallet be used to support authentication and verification of voice calls and text messages? And if not, is that something that you're considering?
That's a really interesting idea. I don't think that we have thought a lot about that. So I guess the answer is I don't know, right? I mean, it feels like something that would tie into to our products, the mobile device, and maybe that makes sense. We have been exploring other services, right? Samsung services and the use of identity, right? So you can think through some of our services. There's even some of the laws that have been passed recently in states like Utah, for age verification for app stores and so on. So I do think that's a great question, a great idea. I don't have an answer for it. I think we just need to put that one on the list and think it through.
And respect for the answer as well, because sometimes people don't like to say they don't know, and it's absolutely a perfectly legit response. So kind of respect for that as well. All right. So Elamitu, apologies if I've butchered your name, but the question there is, do you think digital wallet apps from big firms like Samsung and others will serve as containers for digital credentials from other identity companies? Or do you think we're going to get this kind of mass flood, Rob, of apps from all types of different identity providers for all different use cases? How do you see that when playing out? I guess the question there is kind of, are we seeing a small handful of wallets to rule the others, or are we going to see an absolute deluge of different apps at the outset, or when this technology starts to get some kind of mass adoption? What's your view?
Well, I do think that the wallets, the ones that you mentioned, at the beginning of this podcast, will get the most traction in terms of, being a container, for these types of IDs. Those are the ones that, most of the most of the population, I think, is using. And there's been a lot put into those, right, in terms of, certainly payment technology, but, other types of credentials that you hold, digital keys, I think is going to be a really interesting use of wallet moving into the future too. So I do think if the question was about other issuers adding credentials into the wallet, I think absolutely, right? I think that it will take time, but I think the goal is to open it up in the same way that your wallet, holds a lot of different membership cards, loyalty cards, or other. We want it to be able to hold your different IDs. I mean, today in Samsung Wallet, we hold student IDs, we hold mobile driver's license. I think that's just the beginning. We'll find out, but there's a lot of different credential types out there that, we think could be pushed into wallet.
Yeah. And my interpretation of the question was the same as yours. I think it's about not having lots of issuers of passes or tickets or things like that they're not necessarily all needing to have their own apps. They're quite happy to partner with an organization like Samsung and just use your wallet because you guys have got the distribution and the technical capabilities to pull that off at scale. So I had interpreted it the same way as you.
Maybe I just follow up quickly, Nick. I mean, I do think that there are certain...
Yeah. Of course you can.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
there are certain companies and industries that want to keep users in their own apps. I mean, that's why they build the apps, right? They want people to use them. The difference with Wallet is that it's convenient and you use it all the time, right? So if I'm making payments with it and I'm using it with my ID and I'm, it's available and it's got this, multitude of contents in it, it becomes something different than, an app that I might use less frequently, to, simply hold a ticket or hold a loyalty card. That app may do a lot more, pertains to that business, but I think that's where wallets are differentiated.
Yep. Very good point. Very good point indeed. Rob, I know you look after the US, but one of the questions here is what other countries outside of the US will allow people to put an mDL ID pass in a Samsung wallet? So that might be a tricky one for you to answer because the world's a big place, right? And mDL doesn't necessarily even a standard everywhere. But I guess in terms of some of these other formats, do you have knowledge of that, or is that something that a colleague would know instead?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're working on these projects. In the US, and I was just out in, our headquarters last week, talking about some of these solutions. We've got a group that looks after global. We've got people in region. There are projects happening in Europe, as you mentioned, projects happening in Australia and in other places. So this isn't a US specific thing. I think that we are, simply the maybe the first, to actually actively get these type of credentials into the wallet and have, the starter use cases that are available out there.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think, the mDL stuff is, I suppose it was a little bit of a surprise to me at least, but it did seem to catch a few folk off guard. And it was the first time we really saw what seemed to be a kind of real demand coming from the market. And so it would be understandable that a lot of that early work would happen in the US because there's been such a seemingly early appetite for it, whether it's slowed a little bit, but it certainly that would make sense. A question from Dan for you, Rob. Dan is asking, how will a user of an existing Samsung device know if or when their Samsung wallet can use an mDL in their state?
Great question. I mean, the easiest way...
Just try it.
Yeah. Inside of our wallet, the way that you add an mDL is you hit, there's a little plus symbol that you hit, and it takes you to the addition screen, and you choose IDs, right? And within that section, there's an area to select mDL. And when you open that up, there's a list of states that are, currently supported. So you could select, a state like Colorado and then try to load up a license from Massachusetts, but we'll detect that immediately, right? Tell you that one's not going to make it. So that's probably the best place to see it. Certainly we have resources on the web as well.
Awesome. Dan, please try that and let us know how you get on. Got a question from Leonard. We're starting to get into kind of more future looking stuff. So Rob, your views on agentic AI and the relationship with a Samsung wallet. So I guess this is about identifying an AI as potentially working on a user's behalf, a kind of delegated trust. How are you guys thinking about that? Like, are you thinking, is that something that's on your roadmap or part of discussions? How are you thinking about maybe using the Samsung wallet as a trusted entity in those types of relationships?
Yeah, I think that's a really tricky problem, right? Because at the end of the day, you're delegating the tool, right, to assert your identity on your behalf. And I'm not sure,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're all sure yet, whether that's or how that should be, rolled out or used, or what types of rules should be put around that. But it definitely raises some big issues. So I don't think that, I think it is a future. I think it's, this idea of assistance, doing things on your behalf is going to happen. It's coming. But there's some real open questions about it. So I would say discussion phase, but we don't have a good answer for you how that would work, or to what extent those agents should be equipped to be able to just assert your identity wherever they feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, it's tricky as well. I mean, it's I guess there's questions around liability as well, like what happens if it does something against it and it wasn't meant to, who's liable, and when those questions remain, large businesses really won't get involved. They don't want to inherit these types of problems and risks. They really want a very clear path to adoption. So I think it's a really interesting one, but I think it's there's a lot of moving parts to make agentic AI work well in the current kind of fabric of the internet.
The other one, Nick, is the notion that if the agent buys something for me, and then I decide I didn't want that, right? Or they use my identity to do a transaction, is that open to a chargeback? Are we, is it something that I did? Can it, so I think it just opens up a whole lot of questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really, really interesting work. Is actually kind of Peter Horadan and his team at Vouched are doing some really interesting work in this area. So they're trying to tackle these very questions. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely an interesting company to keep an eye on. Okay, question from Peter. His question is maybe kind of biometric related, but he's asking what steps will be necessary to prove a human owns the mDL. So I think he's likening this back to your question about buying the beer and having to wait for that long queue at the fourth innings. And I think he's saying, look, what happens if a minor who looked, maybe had a mustache or something, but went up and held up your ID and kind of got the beer? How are we imagining that the individual is making sure that you are actually also the owner of that phone and the owner of that identity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that happens during the provisioning process for your ID. So during the provisioning process, you're not only uploading your physical documents, you are doing that liveness check, right? So that liveness check, when we do it, it all has to happen within a short window time period to prove that you are actually the person that is requesting that ID. It gets issued to you. The state approves it. Again, there's, you could be rejected and have to go for an extended review, which might mean just uploading more documentation about yourself. But ultimately, they're the right people. I mean, they're the people that have a system of record, that have your photo on file, have your data, approve you. And then when that provisioning process happens, we're binding that ID to a single biometric. And I think that's really important. So that becomes, whoever biometric that is becomes the person, that can use that ID. So if I unlock my phone, open up the wallet, I hand it to somebody and they walk up to purchase, they can't transmit that identity, right? I think that's really what, the primary thing that binds it. We also have the ability, by the way, when, on readers, you can not only send the age over 21 flag, light it up, green light it, but, show the photo, right? And, there should be some check by the clerk that you are in fact that person.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's a question from Robert, and I'm trying to formulate this one. It's, do you see a place, Rob, where you would have, from an organizational perspective, and I know that some people have work phones and personal phones, and some companies support bring your own device. Do you see a place, or are you guys looking at the ability for an individual to identify themselves working for an organization, so more like an organizational kind of wallet use case where you're not just necessarily proving who you are, but maybe it's proving that you have the authority to, I don't know, act on behalf of an organization? Is that something that's coming up for you guys just now, or not?
Well, I think it starts to combine two different things that are in Wallet. I mean, one is your certified digital credential, your ID. The other is maybe your corporate access card, right? So we can also store, your entry card in the wallet. You walk up to your office, you tap, unlocks the door, and that credential, can be coded so that you can get into certain areas of the building and not other areas of the building. And I think there probably are use cases where those things should be combined. So theoretically, when you get issued that card, they've gone through all the checks to make sure that you're you and you've got your card. But, if somebody else gets access to a card, they could maybe swipe it. So I do think there are cases where you're going to want to submit your ID. And, the difference with, these digital credentials is it reduces all the friction, right? So, in cases in the past where, whoever it is, merchant doesn't want to put a elongated, verification process in the way of a sale, passing, digital identity makes it a whole lot easier to do that, right? So I think you're going to see some of those use cases pop up, and same in the corporate world.
Definitely. Yeah. Fantastic. Rob, we have reached the top of the hour, so we are out of time, but I really appreciate you spending the time. I really liked the audience questions as well. It was clear that everyone was really engaged. Lots of different things coming at you there, and you did admirably answering all those different types of topics that you would have no way to prepare for. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Rob White, Head of Identity Services at Samsung Wallet in the US. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.